Sad. Just unbelievable sadness. Unbelievable sadness, right?
It just reminds me, every minute I spent with him, I regret and I apologize that I did that.
NBC News is reporting that Bill Gates admitted to having affairs, and the Times of Israel says he acknowledged relationships with 2 Russian women while also calling his association with Jeffrey Epstein a serious mistake. That part is no longer rumor or speculation. It came straight from him. He admitted to the affairs. He admitted that meeting Epstein was a major error in judgment. That alone shifted the tone around his image in a big way. But here's where things get complicated. What he has not admitted to are the more explosive accusations floating around in Epstein-linked communications. Those include claims that he allegedly contracted an STD and tried to get antibiotics to pass along to his wife without her knowing. That specific allegation remains unproven and sits in the category of claims, not confirmed facts. The line between what is admitted and what is alleged matters more than ever here, and we will break that part down carefully because facts and accusations are not the same thing. Before we even step into the Epstein files, you have to understand the height Bill Gates was standing at before any of this came out. For nearly 2 decades, Gates was the richest person on the planet, not just wealthy, untouchably wealthy. His name was almost synonymous with success in modern tech culture. He publicly pledged to give away nearly all of his fortune through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, one of the largest charitable foundations ever created. He built a reputation as the responsible billionaire, the man trying to solve global problems with his money. He received an honorary knighthood from the British Crown. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Barack Obama in 2005. Magazine covers framed him as a global humanitarian icon. Bill Gates was not just a tech mogul. He became the symbol of what a powerful billionaire was supposed to look like. Then came the pandemic, and everything intensified. For years, Gates had warned about the inevitability of global outbreaks. When COVID-19 hit, he was suddenly everywhere. Interviews, global panels, vaccine funding discussions. Supporters said he had foresight. Critics said he had too much influence without being elected to anything. Some accused him of profiting from vaccines or using global health initiatives for control, even though those claims remain widely disputed and often unsupported by verified evidence. The divide between admiration and suspicion grew fast, and the public conversation around him shifted into something far more volatile. At the time, a lot of the criticism around Bill Gates was brushed off as fringe noise, the kind of online chatter people roll their eyes at. But what is putting real pressure on his reputation now is not conspiracy talk. It is documented history that cannot be waved away. By 2021, the polished image Gates had built over decades was already starting to crack in public view. Then came the announcement that he and Melinda were ending their marriage after 27 years. In a joint statement, they said they no longer believed they could grow together as a couple in the next phase of their lives.
Sad. Just unbelievable sadness. Unbelievable sadness, right? And again, I'm able to take my own sadness and look at those young girls and say, my God, how did that happen? It wasn't one moment or one specific thing that happened. There just came a point in time where there was enough there that I realized it just wasn't healthy and I couldn't trust.
To the public, it felt sudden and almost unreal. For decades, Gates had been seen as the brilliant Harvard dropout who co-founded Microsoft and helped reshape personal computing. It was at Microsoft that he met Melinda. He was the boss. She was a product manager. She turned him down at first, but he kept trying. When things got serious, he famously made a pros and cons list about whether marriage would interfere with running Microsoft. That detail alone made people look at him sideways. They married in Hawaii. 2 years later, Melinda left the company to focus on raising their 3 children and supporting the foundation work that would define their public image. For years, the brand was disciplined, stable, almost spotless. Then the divorce blew a hole right through that picture. In 2019, the Wall Street Journal reported that Microsoft had opened an internal investigation into an alleged affair Gates had with an employee nearly 2 decades earlier. Gates later stepped down from Microsoft's board. During a CBS interview, when asked if there had been more than one instance of infidelity, Melinda's response was calm but loaded. She did not dodge the weight of the question. The New York Times later reported that Gates had pursued women on multiple occasions, including sending an email to an employee asking her to dinner and writing, "If this makes you uncomfortable, pretend it never happened." That line made headlines fast. It sounded casual, but it hit heavy. According to multiple reports, what reportedly troubled Melinda the most was not just the affairs themselves, but his interactions with Jeffrey Epstein. Melinda said she met Epstein only once, and later described him as abhorrent. She referred to him as evil personified. Those words were sharp and direct, and they changed how many people looked at the entire situation. She was deeply uncomfortable with her husband's association with a convicted adult act offender. And here's the timeline that really matters. A New York Times investigation found that Bill Gates met with Jeffrey Epstein multiple times starting in 2011. That was not before the scandal. That was years after Epstein had already been convicted in 2008 for soliciting prostitution from a minor and was required to register as an adult act offender. That conviction was public record. It was not hidden. It was known. Despite that, meetings reportedly continued. According to reports, some of those conversations took place at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse, where Epstein allegedly downplayed his own crimes and compared them to something as trivial as stealing a bagel. That detail alone made people question the judgment involved. Gates has since admitted that meeting Epstein was a mistake. He has said it clearly. He called it a serious error. But when you combine that admission with resurfaced Epstein-related emails, including claims about Russian relationships and alleged requests for antibiotics, the situation starts to look much heavier. These emails were reportedly drafted by Epstein himself in July 2013. In them, Epstein claimed that he helped Gates obtain medication after encounters with Russian women and that he assisted in facilitating certain affairs. He also wrote that Gates requested deletion of emails referencing an alleged STD and asked about antibiotics that could be discreetly given to Melinda. It is important to note that these claims come from Epstein's own communications and have not been independently verified as factual. Still, the fact that such messages exist at all has intensified scrutiny. This is where the story moves beyond simple reputation damage and into something deeper. Bill Gates built his global image on intellect, innovation, and large-scale philanthropy. He presented himself as disciplined and forward-thinking. But public legacies are not shaped only by achievements. They are also shaped by associations and private decisions that later become public. Gates has said he met with Epstein because of Epstein's connections to wealthy individuals who might support global health initiatives.
You know, I've said I regretted having those dinners, and there's absolutely nothing new on that.
Is there a lesson for you, for anyone else looking at this?
Well, he's dead, so, in general, you always have to be careful.
That was the official explanation. Yet now, with millions of pages of Epstein-related communications surfacing and powerful names appearing across them, the public conversation has shifted. Whether Gates intended it or not, those private meetings and alleged exchanges are now part of the public record, and they are being examined in a way that cannot be ignored. These claims come from Epstein's own communications and have not been publicly confirmed by Bill Gates. Still, the association alone has taken a serious toll on his public image. Even without verified proof behind every allegation, the connection itself has reshaped how many people see him. In today's climate, perception can hit just as hard as proof, and once a name gets tied to controversy, it sticks. Bill Gates built his reputation on intellect, innovation, and philanthropy at a scale very few people in modern history have reached. He was not just another wealthy executive. He positioned himself as a problem solver for the planet. But reputations are not built only on charity work or groundbreaking technology. They are also shaped by private choices, quiet meetings, and the company someone keeps when cameras are not around. No matter how impactful his foundation's work has been, those personal decisions are now linked to his legacy in a way that cannot be separated. Situations like this show how messy it can get when power, influence, and private networks overlap. It becomes harder for the public to figure out what to trust. When billionaires, political leaders, and controversial figures move in the same circles, people start asking questions. That tension did not begin with Epstein. It had been building around Gates for decades. Long before these recent headlines, concerns were already swirling about his influence and the foundation of his massive wealth. During Microsoft's rise to dominance in the tech world, critics questioned whether the company was playing fair. That pressure exploded in 1998 when Bill Gates and Microsoft were accused of violating antitrust and monopoly laws. The case forced Gates to testify in court, and the footage of his deposition was widely circulated. Around the same time, the dot-com bubble burst, sending shockwaves through the tech industry and causing Microsoft's share price to drop sharply. Microsoft survived because of its size and market grip, but the antitrust battle changed something. Gates was no longer viewed only as the genius coder who built an empire from scratch. He became a symbol of corporate power under scrutiny. It was during this era that he began leaning harder into philanthropy, shifting his public image toward global health, education, and long-term legacy building. Over the years, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation distributed roughly $320 million toward media-related initiatives.
I think we're having a reckoning as a society, right? No girl should ever be put in the situation that they were put in by Epstein and whatever was going on with all of the various people around him. So whatever questions remain there of what I can't even begin to know all of it, those questions are for those people and for even my ex-husband. They need to answer to those things, not me.
That funding included grants to major outlets like CNN and NBC News, along with journalism associations and international reporting groups. On paper, the donations are publicly listed. But when people dig deeper, they notice something else. There is limited detail about how every dollar is ultimately used once it moves beyond the initial grant description. The foundation typically discloses funding clearly labeled for media campaigns. What is less visible are the indirect pathways. Money can support academic research, medical journals, or global health institutions that later shape the information pipeline journalists rely on. That does not automatically mean coverage is controlled, but it does mean the overall financial footprint tied to media ecosystems could stretch beyond the reported $320 million. When funding flows through multiple layers, tracking influence becomes more complex. This backdrop helps explain why Gates often received overwhelmingly positive coverage for years, even when controversies surfaced. Beyond media involvement, the Gates Foundation has also played a powerful financial role in global health policy. Outside of national governments like the United States and China, the foundation has been one of the largest contributors to the World Health Organization. Contributions at that level naturally carry influence in shaping funding priorities, research agendas, and long-term strategies. That is not unusual for major donors, but it does highlight how private wealth can intersect with global public policy in serious ways, and at the same time, despite billions donated through philanthropy, Gates's personal net worth has at least doubled since the 1990s. His wealth did not shrink as his giving expanded. Instead, his investments spread across multiple industries, including agriculture. By 2021, Gates had become the largest private agricultural landowner in the United States, controlling more than 269,000 acres through entities such as Cascade Investment, LLC. Many of those land purchases took place during the economic slowdown caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, when farmland prices dipped. Initially, several acquisitions were tied to anonymous buyers before investigative reporting connected them back to Gates. After that disclosure, the purchases were described as strategic, long-term agricultural investments. Still, owning that much farmland gives significant leverage over food production, supply chains, and farming practices. When one individual controls land on that scale, people naturally start asking bigger questions about power, influence, and long-term intent. Gates has also invested heavily in research around genetically modified crops and has publicly supported synthetic and alternative meat products. To some people, that looks like bold innovation aimed at solving food shortages and climate pressure. To others, it feels like one more layer of influence stacking up in the hands of one billionaire. Perspective changes everything. What stands out is timing. Gates's farmland acquisitions began accelerating around 2011. That is the same general period when his meetings with Jeffrey Epstein reportedly started, years after Epstein's 2008 conviction for soliciting prostitution from a minor. The official explanation Gates gave for meeting Epstein was straightforward. He said the discussions were focused on global health initiatives and possible charitable funding opportunities. That was the narrative: philanthropy, networking, big money conversations about solving big world problems. But those meetings happened well after Epstein's conviction became public knowledge. That fact fact alone makes the continued contact harder for many people to overlook. Reports have also suggested that Gates's association with Epstein became a serious issue inside his marriage. Around 2019, as media coverage intensified about those meetings, Melinda Gates reportedly began consulting divorce attorneys. She later said clearly, "I made it clear to him that I did not like him meeting with Jeffrey Epstein." That statement was direct. There was no confusion about how she felt. She also described Epstein in other interviews in extremely negative terms, making it obvious the discomfort ran deep.
Apparently, Jeffrey wrote an email to himself. That email was never sent. The email is, false. So I don't know what his thinking was there. It just reminds me, every minute I spent with him, I regret and I, apologize that I did that.
Additional reports claimed that Gates sometimes visited Epstein during periods of strain in his marriage. Gates has consistently described his connection to Epstein as a mistake and a lapse in judgment. That is his public position. Critics, however, argue that meeting multiple times over several years with someone who had already been convicted goes beyond a one-time error. It becomes a pattern that invites heavier scrutiny. In a PBS interview, when pressed about Epstein's background, Gates admitted that meeting him was a huge mistake and said the association was wrong. More recently, NBC News reported that Gates admitted to having affairs while continuing to deny any criminal wrongdoing. The Times of Israel also reported that he acknowledged relationships with Russian women. Taken together, these admissions, combined with earlier reporting, have reshaped the public conversation around him. What was once seen as isolated controversy now looks, to many observers, like a series of decisions that continue to echo long after they were made. Further complicating the narrative around the resurfaced Epstein-linked communications, one key distinction keeps coming up. Gates has publicly admitted that meeting Jeffrey Epstein was a mistake. He has also admitted to having extramarital affairs. At the same time, he has denied any deeper involvement in criminal conduct. That line matters, but when those admissions are placed next to Epstein's alleged email drafts, referencing Russian encounters and medical concerns, the situation feels heavier. Even if those drafts remain unverified claims written by Epstein, the association alone chips away at the polished image Gates spent decades building. As his personal reputation has taken hits, some observers have also started looking at Microsoft's long-term direction. For most of its history, Microsoft was defined by dominance. It shaped personal computing. It set standards the entire industry followed. There were mistakes along the way, but the overall momentum felt forward and aggressive. In the last decade, though, the story has been more mixed. The Windows Phone stands out as a major project that failed to gain traction despite heavy investment. Microsoft has found real success in cloud computing and gaming, especially with Azure and its Xbox ecosystem. Still, critics argue that the company no longer sets the cultural tone of the tech world the way it once did. The operating systems that define the PC era have evolved more gradually, and the electric sense of groundbreaking innovation that surrounded Microsoft in the 1990s does not hit the same today. Instead of leading revolutions, the company is often seen refining and competing. The bigger picture is not just about one meeting, one controversy, or one divorce. It is about how power, influence, and personal decisions stack up over time. Bill Gates built his brand as a visionary coder who became a global philanthropist. That transformation shaped how the world viewed billionaires for years. But legacy is complicated. It is not written only by donations or corporate milestones. It is also shaped by judgment calls, private associations, and how those choices look when they finally reach the public. If you have thoughts on all this, drop them in the comments. Make sure to like, subscribe to the BeyondFame channel, share this video, and I will see you on the next one.